All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's 10 o'clock. I wanted to start right at 10. Thank you all for sitting there and patiently waiting for us to start the webinar today. I want to kind of pose this question and we'll kind of answer it before we get too far. I want to ask who can use factory design utilities? And here's a hint and here's the answer. The answer is actually probably you. And you'll see that as I kind of dig into what is factory design utilities and how they can be leveraged in ways that aren't even really factory mindsets. I saw a presentation at one point that kind of hinted at this, and I was like, it's a perfect example. You don't have to think of factory as being a traditional factory to leverage these things. So let's go ahead and let me kind of go through a couple of slides here to kind of introduce what we're going to look at today. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Steve Olson. At Mesa, I am the manager of training services, which just means I oversee the training that we offer in terms of picking courses and scheduling things like that. But if you know any of us Mesa tech folk, you know that we do everything from support stuff to teaching classes to consulting. We kind of all do a whole bunch of stuff and we all have things that are our specialties, but we also know a handful of other things as well. Since I am kind of responsible for instructing and I'm an instructor, I also went ahead and got my Autodesk certified instructor, or I'm certified as an instructor from Autodesk. And I also think it's important for me to be certified in the products that I deal heavily with, that I work with folks in. And so I've also gained Autodesk certification in Inventor and AutoCAD. I have a couple other ones, but they're not really relevant to the topic that we're dealing with today. Just to kind of give you a background of where I'm at or where I've come from, I've been at Mesa for 9. I'm going to be hitting 10 weeks or 10 years in about 2 weeks. Most of that has been an instructor, support guy, tech guy, and before that, I spent 5 years at a trailer manufacturer called Fleetwood Folding Trailers, using a variety of products, mostly Inventor, AutoCAD, the Vault, but we also, before those, we used Anvil, we used a little bit of Pro E, so a wide range of stuff. So I I had about 5 years doing what a lot of you folks do, using the software every day, and some of you even in a manufacturing environment. So I want to take just a second and kind of maybe find out a little bit about all of you. The first one I want to find out is anybody out there actually using the factory design utilities? So let me kind of just launch this poll real quick. So I'm going to launch this poll. So is anybody actually using the factory design utilities right now? Okay, so I've got a couple people out there that actually have voted or voted yes. Let me kind of go from there. A lot of you say no, and a couple of you said you've never heard of it. So we'll cover exactly what all these mean in just a moment. I do have another poll question to ask. And I'll quickly share the results from that last one. You can see that most of you said no, you haven't. A couple of you said you've using it, and a couple you've said I've never heard of it even. So the next poll that I want to share with you is, um, do you have a factory layout or a facility layout? And if so, does somebody have to manage that? So I just want to see if anybody out there has factory facility layouts that they have to manage. So we actually have some people that is their responsibility, that they do have a facility layout, and that's them that's responsible for maintaining that. And we also have a couple people they do, but it's out of date. Here, I'll close the poll and then share the results here real quick. So let me share these results. And some of you are in that situation. The 38% of you was basically lining up with what my experience was at Fleetwood, where we did have one, but it was always the last thing that somebody dealt with. We never really kind of was out of date, or it's never really up to date. If we did need to update it, it meant that we were remodeling something, or the company was up for sale, or some crazy thing like that. So I do have two more polls before we dig into our stuff. So just one more to kind of about the product. So let me launch this one. And this is kind of getting at maybe a side. The first two were kind of finding out, the utilities kind of in a traditional sense. This one is a little bit more of a non-traditional, and just asking if your sales or engineering departments could maybe use a more configuration workflow. And so we're not getting any no's, we're getting a couple yeses and some maybes. So I'll give you a couple more seconds to vote, and then I'll close it and share the results here. So I'm going to close this and I'll share the results. You can see that no, I did get at least one no, but there's a lot of yeses. That configuration, that seems to be a really big thing from the customers I talked to. That configuration seems to be one of the kind of the hot topics. And once I kind of had my mind open that factory doesn't necessarily have to mean factory, I saw this as being a possible configuration type tool. And you'll see what I'm talking about once we kind of get into that. Um, and let me kind of hide those results, and I'll share one more. And it's just more of a something uh, I just like to know about all of you is just how did you find out about our webinar today? Our marketing folks like to know, how are we being seen, and where people are finding us. So my marketing group asked me to kind of just ask this poll just so we know who's out there and who's seeing what. So most of you definitely got from, I'll share our results. Most of you are getting our emails, and that is fantastic. That's going to make our marketing people happy. And a couple from Autodesk.com, which is also great to see that our presence is being seen out there as well. So that's more of a me thing than a you thing. So let me kind of go back here. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and kind of get into what we're going to be seeing today. So let me kind of jump down a couple more slides here because I already asked those questions. So factory design utilities, let's just everybody understand exactly what I mean by that. So factory design utilities are a set of tools that allow us to connect AutoCAD Architecture, Inventor, and Navisworks to develop facility layouts. At least that's exactly what Autodesk had in mind. It was kind of facility layout, putting in assets, which are equipment, conveyor lines, fire extinguishers, putting in our fork trucks, everything. So each different application does have its role. And one of the things that I kind of want to point out as well is that, this is part of the product design and manufacturing collection that most of our customers own. It was something they've added at one point in time. There was a factory design suite and a product design suite, and we actually had a mixture of everybody. Some customers even had a few of each. Now you basically get the product design and manufacturing collection, which has your inventor, and then you also get these factory design utilities that are an additional download and install. So again, the assets can be pretty much anything. So you're going to get your building, you're going to get your assets, which are pretty much everything else inside. And I've seen people, fire extinguishers, CNC machines, and more. But what I want to kind of the main point of this topic is, what if we expand the concept of an asset to anything we could possibly imagine? Any product we make, anything, even a component of a product we make. So that asset may be a row of chairs in a concert hall, a checkout stand at a grocery store, shelves and racks in a retail location. So lots of kind of different ways, and kind of begins to make you think that the word factory doesn't really mean factory. And actually, one of the topics or one of the titles I was considering for this was unfactoring factory designs, factory design utilities, because we're taking factory or changing the way of what a factory kind of means in terms of that. And I've actually even heard other folks say that they feel that the product isn't really properly named because it's, there's other ways to use these tools. And I want to, that's one of the main reasons I want to kind of have this topic or kind of share this topic with all of you, because you might be thinking, well, that's factory. I don't have to deal with the factory. But there are other ways that this can be helpful. So let's take a look at a couple non-factory examples. Event planning. If I'm going to be putting on the Winter Classic at Heinz Field, I've got to figure out how to put a hockey rink in the middle of the football field. There's all the equipment that go into making the ice, all the pathways that the skaters and other people are going to want to use because they want to protect the field as best as possible. So some sort of event like that, we could create the platform that the rink stands on as an asset. We can create the hockey rink itself as an asset. We can develop all those handrails and all those pathways and develop that. I also think of when I thought of that, I also thought of, okay, well, um, PPG Paints Arena. They sometimes have concerts down on the arena floor. You got to figure out where the sound booth is going to go. You got to figure out where the rows of chairs are. You got to figure out how many chairs you can fit on there on that arena floor. And so you want to know these things before you begin even selling tickets. So this type of layout, and maybe that even changes depending upon who's coming to town. PPG Paints Arena has Disney on Ice and those types of things coming as well. So each one of those requires a different layout. And Factory Design Utilities is actually a way to kind of figure out some of that stuff. And then another one I thought of is laying out a retail space. We've got a building and we've got to figure out how the retail space is laid out. And this may not be really something that most of you would think of, but this is another way to utilize these tools. And then one other one that was kind of really way off the map, or maybe kind of getting a little bit more closer to what some of you guys would be doing, is the configuration. And some of our customers out there make server racks, the cases that go into that. And some of them even supply and sell and make the components to go in there. And I was thinking about how a server rack has so many slots, and you basically need to figure out how each one of those components fit in there, and some can take up 2 slots or 2 rows or 2 spaces, some take 3 or 4. So just even kind of figuring out the spacing there is another possibility. So let me do 2 demonstrations. I actually had one, and this one here is kind of a secondary one, but I thought definitely demonstrates, but it doesn't really give you all of the real usage or all the tools, or really leverages all the tools. So I want to run through 2 here. So the first one is, I like the idea of the Winter Classic. That really kind of speaks to me as a hockey fan, and I know a lot of folks that are our customers are big hockey fans. So I wanted to kind of incorporate this, and it was a very good example of of an event planning, a very non-traditional factory um, type setup. So I want to kind of get into this one here. So I downloaded off the web a model of Heinz Field. So don't think I did this. This is something I downloaded off the internet of Heinz Field. Even has some of the area around it. The Factory Design Utilities creates this big floor. Everything that we have has a landing surface, and by default, the landing surface is going to try to land on the floor. So one of the things I had to do here is I had to initially I had to have to push this model a little bit into the ground, just a little bit. That's why you're kind of seeing the hillside kind of come up out of it, because I actually have it just about 8 inches below that surface, because I wanted everything to land on the field, which wasn't the bottom of the model. So you can see I have my model here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over my asset browser. So all these assets, some of them there's some system assets that are preloaded that come with the software that Autodesk creates, and they're very generic. And those work great in some scenarios, but in some scenarios we need to make up our own. So I have developed my own assets for this particular project. So in my event planning user assets, I have basically this block, which is the platform the rink would sit on. So I'm going to go ahead and just left click and drag that into the window. And I'm going to go ahead and set this on this origin point here. So let me zoom in here. So here's my origin and where I want that to sit. And once I place it, I'm going to get these coordinate systems here. Just taking a few extra seconds to load that and create that. Once I have that placed, I can then position it. It's going to by default land on the floor because it's an asset, and the assets have a floor definition in them. Obviously, this is not the way I want the rink to be running. So this coordinate system here allows me to rotate or translate this object in one of those directions. So let me kind of orbit this around here, try to get this thing kind of running parallel to the rest of the stadium here. Let me get this window maximized. There's a little bit of a pain in the butt there because that window wasn't quite maximized. So now that I've got that, I'm going to right click and say done, and that asset is placed. So I've got that platform now in the middle of my field. So now I want to put the hockey rink there. So I'm going to bring the hockey rink in, left click and drag it into the window. It's going to have to generate the assets. That's what's taking a couple extra seconds, is creating a part file for me. And I'm going to kind of try to just locate that center as best that I can. Now, one thing that I did kind of on purpose here is the hockey rink's definition of its floor is going to have it land on the field, not on the platform. Not a big deal. That's where I can use these coordinate systems to grab this. And I know because I made the platform, I know I made it 12 inches tall. So just move it up 12 inches. So now I obviously want to rotate it. So I'm going to rotate it, kind of get to a top view here so I can see what I'm doing. And what's on the left side right now is essentially the benches, and the right-hand side of the ice is the penalty box area. And that looks like I've got it pretty well centered. If I wanted to, I could slide it in this axis just a little bit, make sure it's centered up. Realistically, that platform probably needs to be just a little bit bigger, but I kind of just left it as is just for sake of what I'm doing. So there, I've right-clicked and now I'm done. So if this is really an event I'm planning for, I could start developing the handrails and the pathing and everything like that. I want to kind of get to a different scenario though, to kind of give you a better idea of how the tools are going to work in general. Because this is a good example, but I don't think it's really sells or really kind of conveys all the tools here. So let me kind of just quickly save this and close it out. All right, so I'm going to close this one. Actually, while that's working on, I'm going to go ahead go over here to AutoCAD, because I want to show you kind of, or set up the scenario I'm going to show here. In this scenario, I have a floor plan of a retail space, and I tried to find one online. I couldn't find one that really fit the way that I wanted it to, so I created just a very simplistic one here. This is a rough layout of what the local Walmart in my area looks like. It was probably the best retail space I could think of. And so you can see here, I've got all the walls. I just threw a couple doors in there, and I have a self-checkout area that I want to lay out. So this is an AutoCAD file, really nothing just yet. I just kind of just drew a bunch of lines and everything. So I'm going to close this one out because I want to use this file as the basis of a layout in Inventor. So I'm going to kind of just stop right there. I'm going to close that one out. I'll go back over to Inventor. And I'll close this guy. So now here I have a factory tab in Inventor. That's because I have installed the Factory Design Utilities, and you can see there's layout, create assets, projects, etc. I'm going to go to new layout, and you can see I can create a new layout from an AutoCAD DWG. I'm going to do that. That's the file I just showed you. I want this to be the basis of one of my layouts. So I'm going to go into my workspace. I'm going to find in my retail is where I have that DWG set up. So I'm going to go ahead and say open. So it's going to generate that DWG. It's going to actually create basically an assembly here for me. You can see at the top of the screen, I'm getting assembly 1. It's building an assembly from my template, and it's going to be bringing that DWG in as essentially an underlay for me to work from. And so for some reason, my machine always jumps back to AutoCAD once it's done. So now I have that. So it's just really an AutoCAD drawing, nothing really special there. So I want to bring in some assets and show you how these would work in a little bit more of an example that would be maybe a little bit more like a factory layout, and also, again, sticking with our theme of not being actually a factory. So I have a retail set of assets here. Actually, I want to start with a regular system assets. I'm going to go back up here at the top. I just want to show you one of the system assets that actually would probably make sense here. I actually want to go to the safety equipment folder, and I want to put some guardrail around my self-checkout area. I want to kind of create some fencing to kind of keep the customers flowing through this area in the proper way. So I'm going to grab this angled guardrail, just left click and drag it into my window. And I'm going to kind of snap it to this AutoCAD file. And it's going to want to rotate, so I'm going to go ahead and allow it to rotate. Actually, grab that arrowhead there so I can rotate it 180 degrees. And I'll right click and say done. So you might be thinking, okay, well, that's great. Now, how do I do I need to put more in there, another section or whatnot? I don't necessarily need to. One of the great things about a lot of these assets is they can be left with key parameters that I can then edit on placement, or I can make it more like an iPart that I have different configurations that I can drop different configurations in. So in this example here, if I pick on this fence and go to my factory properties tab, you'll see that I got an angle, a height, a length, and a turn length. And the turn length is basically this leg over here. So I'm going to go ahead and change this parameter to 360 inches, or 30 feet. And you'll see that this leg over here will change. Just taking a few extra seconds for me here. My machine must be working slow for me today. So there you can see it stretched that out, and there I have that occurrence. So what I want to do next is I want to bring in one of my authored assets. So I'm going to go into my user assets, and I have some retail ones. And I've noticed that a lot of the self-checkouts now, they have more of a kiosk than the old setup. And so I modeled up one of each. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring this express self-checkout into my model. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop it right about, let's go drop it on right about there. So I'm going to right click on that and tell it I'm done with placing that one. And I'll place another one. Kind of give it some space. And actually I'm going to leave these intentionally offset too, just for a purpose here. So I want to show you that if I have those kind of like offset like that, I can actually align them underneath this relationship folder here. I have an align command. And the align command lets me pick components that I want to align to a reference component. And I'll tell it to use this alignment position here, and you'll see it'll slide that object back, and now they're both aligned. So real quickly here, let me, that was real simple. I just threw the object in there. So let's kind of take a quick peek at how something gets authored before I throw any more assets in here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a model of a different checkout stand. So I have a little bit more of a bigger checkout station and not so much the express version. So here it is. It's just a multi-body part. There's really nothing special here. I kind of modeled it up as a multi-body part just by looking at reference images. I don't really have any real dimensions. I kind of just made something up here. But if I had some, let's say an assembly, I could derive this or shrink wrap this into a simplified part that I could then use the asset. You really could use the entire assembly as an asset, but it feels like it's the perfect opportunity to kind of derive it into like a shrink wrap or just a regular derive to kind of make it into a little bit lighter weight part for us to work with. But what I have here is I got my multi-body part that I kind of made up. I'm going to go to the factory tab here, and I can go into what they call the asset builder. So it kind of is laying it in here. You can see like it kind of fell on its side here. And this gray landing area is basically what it was going to call its landing surface. So I don't know if you've caught this before or not, but in Autodesk world, you kind of work the ribbon left to right. So they kind of built these commands. I want to start by defining my landing surface. So I'm going to go to my landing surface. I basically just need to pick a face that I want to be landing on that landing surface. And I can also pick an insertion point. So I'm going to go to my insertion point, kind of click on here, and that looks like that's pretty good. And if there's some other options there for show the coordinates or preview, I don't need to do that. Now, one thing I will point out here is with that hockey rink, I could have offset it or told it to offset that its landing surface was a foot below its bottom face. But I kind of left it like that to prove just a way that would work. But I probably it'd be more intelligent for me to set it up that it would land on the ground a foot up, so it was landing on my platform. Just another idea there. So now I could go into my define connectors, and that's different types of geometry that I can say if I have a conveyor belt and I want to link section 1 to section 2 and kind of have some sort of connection and kind of have things pop together, I could do that. I'll show you that with my next asset. The asset properties is a way that I could pre-populate a lot of the iProperties for this asset, which again is an option. I'm not going to go ahead and do that in this case. There's some other things here that we'll dig into in just a moment with the connector, class properties, and the asset variants. I'll show you that in my next example here. I'm just going to jump all the way over here to the publish asset. So it wants me to save it because I added the landing surface and the insertion point. So now it's going to open up this asset publisher. You can see here, destination is where I want to have it saved. And what name do I want to give it? I'm going to give it today's date, which would be 3-22. I want it to go to my retail assets. An asset type standard, pit, or platform. Is it going to go to standard on the ground? Is it going to be below it in some sort of pit? Or is it going to land on some sort of platform above the ground? My 3D options, I could simplify it and then pick some sort of coarse, medium, or custom. I kind of just usually, in this case, since I made a multi-body part that's somewhat simplified, I don't feel that I need to do that. I could also tell it to generate the Navisworks model. And the idea here is Navisworks is part of this suite. So if I wanted to have it generate the cache file that is referenced by the Navisworks model, I could do that now, or I could let it do it whenever I take this over to Navisworks. It's not going to really matter a whole lot in this scenario, so I'm just going to kind of just leave it as is. I'm going to go to my 2D options. So in the 2D options, I have published 2D asset. So one of the main things, or one of the things I think are probably kind of the coolest things about Factory Design Utilities is I have 2D and 3D assets. So here I'm an inventor. I can place the asset as a 3D object. When I go over to AutoCAD, what I will see is its 2D representation. And the 2D representation basically is a block that looks like this, that I could sketch my own one up and say use this, or I can actually have it generate one, which realistically, here I'm going to tell it to preview this. So while I talk about it, we can, it takes a couple seconds to do this. So I'll talk about it while it's generating. Basically what it does is it takes a top view of this and projects it down into a sketch on that landing surface and uses that as its 2D representation. So it always takes about 30 seconds to a minute here for it to generate. So if I keep talking long enough, it should pop up here. And it's basically just an AutoCAD representation, again, of what that would look like. But while it's doing that, let me just kind of set up the idea behind these is I'm going to have an inventor model, and then I'm going to have actually a separate AutoCAD file. These things will be, there will be a special command to allow me to sync between these two files. And like I said, when I go into an inventor model, I can place the 3D asset, and there we finally go. It took a little bit longer than normal, but you can see there's the 2D representation. As I go between the two files, I'll see the one, and I think personally I like being able to drop either a 2D representation, and when I go to inventor, it knows where to put the 3D and vice versa. So I'm gonna go ahead and say okay to this. I'm gonna tell it to publish this asset then. It's gonna take just a few seconds. Okay, so now I have that. I'm going to close this. I'm going to tell it to finish the asset browser and close this file. So here I am back into my layout. I'm going to go to my asset browser, and underneath my user assets, under my retail, I now have the one I just populated. I created one the other day just to make sure if for some reason this one failed, and that's why I have two of them there. But I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop this one in here. Let's say I want to drop it right about there. And I'll just drop one of those for right now. I don't need to drop any more than that. So I'll right click and say done. And now I have that one. I'll get rid of this other one. Before I do the next one, I want to show you this shelving unit has a few variations to it and a couple things that are different. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to edit this one so you can see a couple things special about this one. So in this case, I've already defined the landing surface. I've actually already defined a connector. You can see that's what this green dot in this coordinate system here is, and there's one on the other side. So in a shelving unit, I'm thinking that I might have to set up row upon row upon row and kind of get things to kind of connect and connect with each other. You see I have some key parameters here over as well, the depth of the shelf, the height of the overall unit, and the width being how wide the unit is in general. If I go to these asset variations or variants, what I have here is essentially kind of like an iPart where I've picked up the width and I've added it to a table, and I have a 4 feet or 3 feet, a 4 foot, and a 5 foot width. If I hit this little plus mark here, it'll let me add a 6 foot shelf, and I can say, well, this would be 72 inches. And say okay. So now it's that simple to just add another variation. Again, I could have multiple different values, but in this scenario, I thought it would be best to just have that one. The connector class properties, there's all kinds of different ones. I actually created one specifically for this, and it's all about understanding the properties that each one should have, and if there's anything that's going to be shared between multiple occurrences. Let's, in this case here, I didn't do this, but let's say I have different heights. I could say that, the entire row should share one height value, and I could set that up in the connector class. But like I said, I didn't do that. It's possible to set them up. It's a little bit more trickier than it's not super simple, but it's not super difficult either. It's kind of somewhere in the middle there. So just be aware that that's a possibility here. But again, there's all kinds of preset ones. And again, a lot of them are set up for a real factory type setup. I'm going to go ahead and tell it to finish the asset editor. It's going to want to save the changes. And to a certain extent here, it's going to kind of just rerun through those settings that I had before. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. So basically, it's republishing this asset. So what I'm going to do here, once this is done, I'm going to go into the grocery area and place a couple of these. Now I want to close the loop here. I want to go to AutoCAD and show you what this model would look like in AutoCAD, place a couple assets, and then come back to Inventor and show you how that gets all refreshed. So that's kind of where we're headed with this one. So just bear with me here a second. It is kind of populating these assets here, taking a few extra seconds for me. So just bear with me here a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and close this file. And so now I'm back over to my model. Give it a second here, I guess. one of the things that I'll get to show you here once I finally get back to AutoCAD and kind of just help you understand all the pieces while I'm sitting on my machine here is Inventor is really where we can develop assets. We could do that in AutoCAD too. It's either or. If you have things in AutoCAD, you don't have an Inventor, you could develop those assets in either location and kind of get those space claims created. Um, one of the reasons we have AutoCAD, and actually I think is interesting. I didn't quite catch this when I first got into this, was that it's actually not just AutoCAD; it's AutoCAD Architecture. And the reason that it's AutoCAD Architecture is the fact that I will then be able to put some doors and windows, etc., in my model. So that's where I'm going to be able to easily add architectural type elements to my building layout. So once we get there, it'll be I can show you all these things. It's just taking its sweet old time to worry about something. I'm not sure what it is at this point. I'm very sorry that it's delayed. One of the reasons I haven't gone over to AutoCAD yet is, again, it will allow me to sync up. And I would jump over to AutoCAD at this point to show you those workflows, but I don't have the AutoCAD file yet because I haven't generated it yet. Yes, I do have that floor plan, but it's not really connected to this file. You'll probably see here on my screen, I have the Sync AutoCAD and the Sync Navisworks. And the reason those are there is it will, again, sync those files, but if I haven't generated it yet, it will then generate it the first time I sync, because obviously there's nothing to sync to. It will then generate that file. So like I said, because I have this little roadblock here, I'd be willing to jump over to AutoCAD and kind of get a little bit out of sync, but I don't have that quite yet. Almost getting me to the point where I feel like I almost be better shutting it down or not shutting it down, but at least stopping this and coming back to Inventor and getting caught up quickly. I might just think I might try that real quick. Let me see if I can close Inventor so I can get started on it again. So you can see actually it does have that retail floor plan set up there. So let me just, again, I'll open it up. I'll throw a couple of those assets in so we can sync to AutoCAD and all that here in just a moment. Okay, so I probably don't have those assets in there. I'll throw the shelving unit in, and then when I get to AutoCAD, I'll show you a couple things, and then I'll get those to sync up. So here is my floor plan again. It doesn't have those assets like I showed you, but I'll throw the shelving unit in, and then when I get to AutoCAD, I wanted to place some components from there too. So let me go to my user assets, my retail, go to my shelving units. Notice that there's a 4 here. That 4 is representing that I have 4 variations of that asset. So like I said, I'll click and drag and bring that into my design. So there is my shelving unit. So I'm going to go ahead and drop one. So now that it's dropped one, I can say done with that. And it'll ask to place another one. And this is where the connectors will show up. You can see here that I've got those green dots showing open connectors. So as I get close to this model with this one, you'll see I get a little yellow line connecting them, and I'll kind of bring them together and they'll snap in there. I'll drop that one, and I'll drop one more just for the sake of doing that. So I'll drop that one there. So now real quickly to kind of show you, I have variations of those. So when I place that one, it kind of just left the default one in there. But if I go to my factory properties now, you can see I have a select variation or variant. I can pick and make that a 5-foot shelf. And then I'll tell it to update, and it will then spread to make that one the right length or the right width. So like I said, let me just quickly save this. I'll go over to AutoCAD. I'll place some of those assets too, so you can see that. So if I save this, I'll sync to AutoCAD. So now, like I was saying before, it's going to generate that AutoCAD file for us. And once it's generated, it's actually will offer to open it up for us. And I'll let it do that. One thing that I will tell folks, when you go to do that sync, the two applications don't like if the other file is open. So when I go to AutoCAD and I say open this up, that's great. I'm going to want to come back to Inventor and close down the Inventor model, because if I go to sync them and that file is open, it will give me grief. You can see here it's now saying, hey, I made this file. Do you want to open it now? Yes, I would like to do that. So I'm going to go over to AutoCAD. So when I get into the AutoCAD one, you'll see that I already have those shelving units there because I placed those as assets. So let me just kind of throw a couple more assets in here, and then I'll show you one more. I'll show you a little bit of how the architecture element to this works, and then we'll jump back to Inventor and wrap up. So I'm going to drag one of these variations in. I kind of try to double click on it and then try to drag it into, so it wasn't software wasn't too happy with that. So you can see I'm getting the connectors. I'll connect those together. If I go to do my express self checkouts, I'll drag one of these guys in. I can place one of those. You'll want to spin. I'll go to one of these. Actually, one of the things about this is I have to refresh this because I created one in Inventor that populated a new one. I actually do need to refresh to see that secondary one. The one I saw there was the one I created previously. So I'm going to left click and drag one of these in. Yep, I keep getting a little ahead of myself here. Let me get out of that last one. And I can drop one of these in as well. I can spin it. All right. So let me just real quickly show you some of the architecture elements here. I'm going to close or just move away my asset browser. So in AutoCAD Architecture, we have things that will create walls and doors and windows. I'm just going to quickly create a wall here. Quickly create like 3 walls. I'll throw a couple doors in them so you can see that element, and then we'll sync up back up to Inventor. So I'm going to pick on the wall command. The properties dialog box is going to allow me to say how thick is the wall, how tall is the wall, and add some other elements to it. I'm going to zoom in here, and basically drawing a wall is like drawing a line. So I'm going to pick this corner here. You can see it's kind of creating a wall. It's on the wrong side though, so I'm going to hit Control. Control will flip the wall to the other direction. And it does that, and I'm going to zoom in here and get this intersection right here. And then I'm going to come this way. The wall's going on the wrong side of my line. I'll flip it over. Come to this intersection. And I'll come up to there. All right, so now I just want to throw 2 doors in there. I have a couple double doors on the end. When I pick the door command over here, it's going to show me, oh, it's a single door. But I can hit this browse, and it'll open up another tool palette or a catalog where I can pick a different type of door. And I want to use a double door. So I'll double click on double door here. It'll change this one over here so I can close this catalog. The door wants to know a wall to fit in, so I have to hit this wall. And you can see it's starting to show me a door. And because I have the floor plan underneath it, I can actually snap into some of that geometry. So there's one door there. I'll come over to this intersection here, get this door there. And if I zoom out, you'll see, well, Steve, those doors are not the right size for what we had. Well, AutoCAD Architecture has different sizes of doors. So if I can click on, let me get out of the command I'm in and click on that door, it will let me resize it. And you'll see that I get little tick marks here. Once I click this arrowhead, I get little tick marks showing me standard sizes. So I'll pick a standard size for that one, come over to this one, do standard size for this one. All right, so now I've got my walls in there. And that again, that's the point or the purpose of AutoCAD Architecture being in the Factory Design Utilities. It gives me the ability to create this facility with these specialized tools. So I'm going to save this one. I'm going to tell it to sync to Inventor. So it wants me to save this. That's fine. Now, when I do this, it wants me to then actually, it'll save it and also want to close this file to open into Inventor. Unfortunately, Inventor doesn't offer to close it when I sync, and it offers to open it up in AutoCAD. So just one more second here to open this one up, and then you'll see how I'll actually have 3D versions of those checkout stands that I put in, and I'll also have 4 shelving units versus the 3 that I had placed when I was in Inventor. So if I zoom in here, you can even see my walls and my doors. There are the 2 checkout units I placed. And if I zoom in here, now I have 4 shelving units versus the 3. So let's kind of just go and kind of wrap this up here because that's what I wanted to show you. So there is a popular commercial out there. What is your mountain or hill that you're climbing? So I'll say, what's your factory? With Factory Design Utilities, I think I've kind of shown it's not really a factory, or it doesn't have to apply to a solely factory. So what's the factory that you're dealing with? What are you trying to work with? And again, it could be some sort of configuration, it could be some sort of other way. If you have equipment that fits together in a very specific way, or in a chain, we can use some of those customized connectors to get them to snap together and give you a layout. Now, all this can go into creating Inventor DWGs or IDWs. I didn't take it to that step, but all those things are available. The reason Navisworks is part of the Factory Design Utilities is we could have models from all kinds of different CAD sources, and that's the kind of the one of the things that Navisworks can do is it can aggregate all that data into one model, and you can do some clash detections. Certain versions of Navisworks have a timeliner, so you could plan a remodeling phase over a couple of different things. So there's lots of different elements to Navisworks. It also can do some visualization. So there are some reasons there. I didn't want to spend time on that because it's not really what I was trying to illustrate here. So I have one last poll question before we wrap up, and I'll ask for other questions. If you have questions now, feel free to type them into the chat or the question panel. But one last poll here. I just want to see if you guys have, now that you've seen what this can do, and I do apologize, I did have some performance issues there. Now that you've seen this, what do you think you can implement this right away? Do you think you've got enough that you can do it? Do you think you might need, you think you like it, but you might need a little bit of help um, getting into it, or you still don't see that it's a good fit for you? I just kind of want to get an idea there. I will, while you're taking this poll, I will let you know that we are developing a factory design utility class that's going to be added to our course calendar or course catalog. That if you guys are looking into for that, look for that class to be added here the next, probably I'd say the next month or so, that it will be added and start looking for classes. But I'll share our results here. So you can see that we actually do have a pretty good mix. Some of people are going to go out and try to use it today. Some people say they want to use them, but they think they're going to need a little bit of help. Some people are still considering it, and there's a couple people out there that just um, don't really see a good fit for them, and that's fine. As much as I want to widen the spectrum of what people think factory design utilities are, I definitely recognize that it's not going to be a fit for everybody. But my main purpose today was to kind of help you think and realize it's not just factory; it can be for anything. And also, I think it's also valid, for you, or helpful for you to see what these can do. Because I know myself, I didn't really know exactly everything could do until I started digging into it, and I actually was pretty impressed with how the workflow is set up and what you can do with those. So I guess then just one last call for questions here. Do you have any questions for me about how factory design utilities or anything that you saw today about what you saw? Again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the question panel in the GoToMeeting, and I'll try to answer as many of those as we can before we wrap up. All right, looks like we don't have any questions. I do want to thank all of you um, for spending your time with me today. And by all means, if you need help kind of getting these implemented, that's what we're here for. That's what we're striving to do. Is, again, one of the things that I look as my role is to kind of sit here and help you guys get where you need to go, kind of figure out how to go from point A to point B. And that's what our whole purpose is. And one of the things I enjoy most about my job is finding ways to kind of help people maybe use multiple different products to get their job done better, or improve what they're doing. And that's kind of what one of my main goals. I know almost all the goals here, everybody at Mesa has that same driving thought behind everything they do. So again, thank you guys all so very much for attending this class today, and hope to see you all either at one of our events or next time I'm out at your customer, or not your customer, next time I'm out at your site. I hope to see you guys. All right, so thank you very much, and be on the lookout for our next webinar.